The Sea Eater. In 1862, ships crossing the open ocean began reporting something impossible. The sea would suddenly rise and moments later, enormous tsunamis struck nearby coasts without warning, leaving destruction behind with no clear cause. Sailors described glimpses of something beneath the surface, not fully visible, but it had two massive arm-like structures holding an upright body and a shape so large it didn't look like a creature. It looked like a moving piece of the ocean itself. They started calling it the Sea Eater. Its mouth was always open, stretching wide enough to consume anything in its path. It was again sighted in 1927 when a woman named Evelyn Mary reported seeing something far out in the ocean. She didn't describe it as an animal. She called it a moving mountain, slowly shifting across the water before disappearing beneath it. 3 years later in 1930, a fisherman claimed to have seen the same thing, an enormous vertical shape rising briefly above the surface. That same day, a massive tsunami struck the nearby coast, causing catastrophic damage. It sounded like a deep, low vibration powerful enough to be felt through the water, like something massive moving with its mouth open and pulling everything toward it. The Bloop. In 1997, a network of underwater microphones operated by scientists detected one of the loudest sounds ever recorded in the ocean. It came from the South Pacific, near one of the most remote regions on Earth, and it was powerful enough to be picked up over 5,000 kilometers away. They called it the Bloop. The sound had a distinct pattern. It wasn't a random noise, and it didn't match known events like earthquakes or underwater eruptions. Instead, it resembled something organic, like it came from a living source. But there was a problem. For a sound that loud to be produced by a creature, it would have to be far larger than any known animal, much bigger than a blue whale, and nothing of that size is supposed to exist. The signal came from extreme depths, where sunlight never reaches and pressure is intense, a region still largely unexplored. Some scientists later suggested it could have been an ice quake, massive ice cracking deep underwater, but even that didn't fully match the structure of the sound and cannot produce that loud sound. We've explored only a small fraction of the ocean, and most of what lies at those depths is still completely unknown. The Kraken. In the early 1700s, sailors traveling through the North Atlantic began reporting something massive beneath their ships. They described enormous tentacles rising out of the water, thick enough to wrap around entire ships and covered with suckers, strong enough to grip and crush wood. They called it the Kraken. According to multiple accounts, ships wouldn't be attacked instantly. First, the sea would go strangely calm. Then the water beneath would begin to darken, and that's when it appeared. Long, twisting arms breaking the surface, reaching upward, wrapping around the ship, pulling it down piece by piece. What makes this more unsettling is that parts of these stories weren't entirely dismissed. Giant squids do exist. These creatures can grow to enormous sizes, living deep in the ocean and rarely seen alive. But even they don't match the scale described in these encounters. And unlike most sea life, squids are known to come up from the deep, especially at night, which means if something larger exists, it wouldn't need to stay hidden forever, because the Kraken was never described as something distant. It was described as something that rises when the surface becomes too quiet. Gran Maja. In 1996, during a deep-sea monitoring operation near the Mariana Trench, instruments began detecting something unusual. At depths where pressure is strong enough to crush steel, sensors picked up a massive body displacing water in a steady, controlled path, far larger than any known creature. Initial estimates didn't make sense, as even the largest known animal, the blue whale, couldn't survive at those depths. Then came the more disturbing part. Some deep-sea equipment sent into those regions didn't just fail, they stopped transmitting instantly. Later analysis showed brief distortions in the surrounding water before the signal cuts, as if something massive had passed directly near the equipment. Based on repeated observations, researchers began estimating a size far beyond normal limits, something stretching hundreds of meters. And here's what makes it worse. We've explored less than 5% of the ocean, and the Mariana Trench alone is still mostly untouched, with vast sections neither seen nor understood. So if something that large is already moving down, then it simply means we haven't gone deep enough. The Lusca. In the early 1900s, along the coast of the Bahamas, divers and fishermen began reporting something strange near the deep blue holes scattered across the ocean floor. These blue holes are underwater cave systems, dropping hundreds of feet into darkness, with narrow tunnels that twist far beneath the surface. And according to multiple accounts, something was living inside them. Locals called it the Lusca, a massive creature described that has a part of octopus and a part of shark lurking deep underwater. Some accounts describe these tentacles slowly emerging from the water and wrapping around boats, tightening it until it breaks. Divers exploring these blue holes have reported seeing a creature with shark-like face and tentacles behind, followed by sudden, violent movements of water. And some never came back at all. Scientists explain these stories as strong tidal currents moving through the cave systems. But currents don't reach out of the water and don't choose when to appear and when to disappear. Because if something is actually living inside those underwater tunnels, it knows exactly where the entrance is and exactly when something is close enough to take. The Leviathan. In 1848, a British naval crew reported something they couldn't explain in the waters of the South Atlantic. The sea had been calm for hours, until suddenly the surface began to shift, not into waves, but into a slow, rising disturbance, like something massive was moving just beneath them. At first, they thought it was a current. Then, a long, dark form broke the surface. This serpent stretched across the water before slipping back down, leaving behind a violent pull that rocked the entire ship. The crew later described it as a serpent-like body, far longer than their vessel, moving with controlled motion. What makes this more unsettling is that this wasn't the only report. Similar accounts appear in old maritime records, ships encountering massive serpent-like forms, followed by sudden turbulence that completely destroyed the ships. Long before these reports, ancient texts had already described something like this, a serpent called Leviathan. And that's where the line starts to blur, because when descriptions written thousands of years ago begin to match encounters recorded much later, it stops sounding like imagination and starts sounding like something that was seen more than once.